Hello, I am Michelle Shellhorn, Director of Content Marketing at Amplity Health. Welcome to today's virtual discussion, Closing the Gap Between Precision Medicine and Patient Care. Before we get started today, I'd like to cover some logistics. We encourage you to submit questions to the Q&A function on your Zoom screen. We will answer them at the end of the program. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will email you a link after the event. If you have any technical difficulties, please exit the webinar and rejoin. If the problem persists, send an email to the address shown on the screen. I am honored to introduce the host of today's discussion, Chris Baker. As Amplity Health CEO and a member of their board of directors, Chris aims to build on the company's success and incorporate deeper proprietary data-led solutions. Previously, she was president of the Symphony Health Division at ICON. She also served as executive vice president and global head of ParXL's clinical FSP outsourcing business and held sales and marketing leadership roles at Pfizer. Welcome, Chris. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I'm excited about today's discussion on Precision Medicine 2.0 and how to accelerate patient engagement in oncology and beyond. It's my privilege to introduce two outstanding industry experts joining me today. I'm going to start with Jonathan Meek. Jonathan has 30 years of strategic healthcare and marketing experience or market experience across 20 different countries in pharma, medical devices, diagnostics, and health IT. His expertise includes precision medicine, minimally invasive surgery, R&D, and organizational leadership. And he now runs his own consulting company as a trusted advisor and growth strategy expert. Thanks for being part of the discussion, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chris.
My second guest is Brian O'Donnell. Brian has 25 plus years of pharma experience and is one of our key leaders here at Amplity. He's a senior general manager for our integrated and outsourced sales teams, where he crafts winning strategies with our clients to create blended sales teams, precision medicine, as well as access and reimbursement strategies. His experience includes working for Wyeth, now Pfizer, for Centocor, J&J, now Janssen Biotech, and leading biologics for Endo Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, let's jump right into it. I know this is going to be a great conversation. Let me start with my first question. The definition of precision medicine has shifted and changed over time. For the purpose of today's discussion, how would you describe it in a sentence or two? And let's start with you, Jonathan, and then have Brian chime in.
Yes, thanks, Chris. For today's discussion, I guess there's the formal and then there's the working definition. The formal definition put out by the FDA defined it as an approach to tailoring disease prevention and treatment that considers the differences in people's genes and environments and lifestyles. From a working definition, and I guess the focus of today, it's more around the ability to leverage comprehensive diagnostic testing to identify patients able to receive treatments with medicines tailored to their conditions. And I think that we often think about it in terms of an oncology, but I think it's fair to say areas such as neurology and cardiovascular is also on the rise too. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, that's a great point. Brian, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd love to add in that, we've seen precision medicine really evolve to include a more personalized medicine model. I agree with Jonathan. It's moving beyond oncology into other areas. And I know he brought up neurology. Very excited about how precision medicine is going to play a role in Alzheimer's disease. And we're going to see that, duplicated in a number of areas. And there are so many learnings that we have been able to bring to bear because of the early days of work in oncology.
Yeah, it's a great point. Very exciting times. Regarding the impact of precision medicine in oncology to date, what are your thoughts on the key drivers and the barriers, and how would you rate the progress that has been made? Brian, why don't we follow up with you?
Thanks, Chris. Well, I think some of the key drivers we see is really more availability of highly sensitive diagnostics that are really able to pinpoint and monitor specific drivers of the disease. And we look at the creation of targeted therapies that are able to optimize the care for patients that are identified and give them a better chance at treatment. And then really an ever-growing data platform that's able to help support clinical decisions. Prescribers really are looking for opportunities to be able to make more informed, data-driven decisions for their patients. When we think about some of the restrainers, though, because the promise of precision medicine is still there, there's still a lot of opportunity for improvement. And there's really a lack of ownership at that last mile between the patient identification, the diagnostic, and to the treatment. It's no secret in the US marketplace, we have a highly fragmented and taxed healthcare system.
Yeah.
And so the complexity of decision making because of this fragmentation and the complexity really creates some difficulties in the therapy decisions and precision medicine. And then there are a lot of missed opportunities to find ways to simplify care. And so these are some of the areas that, we believe there's still a lot of opportunity, whether it's in oncology or other therapeutic areas, in rare and ultra-rare diseases as well. Jonathan, your thoughts?
Yeah, Brian covered them fantastically. Precision medicine is only as good as the success that we have in our customers having the confidence to prescribe the right therapies to the right patients. And along the way, that every year that the complexity of this field enhances and expands. And I think the challenge that we have is to be able to think very carefully about what does it take to actually enhance the confidence of those people through simplification and the use of data and the use of effective workflows to have physicians look at new therapies, understand those therapies, and to deliver them confidently to their patients. And I think that when you look at the restrainers along the way, a lot of them have to do with the work rates of many of the folks, particularly in the community areas, and the general lack of availability to easy access things like diagnostics, but also to be able to have support around their clinical decision making. And I think that's where we often talk about the last mile, that whole area about closing that gap.
Yeah, those are great points. It's a complex journey. Let's just double click for a moment into that concept of the last mile, often used to reference in precision medicine, that journey. How do you define the concept, and what are the critical problems that need to be addressed by stakeholders to overcome the resistance in that last mile? Jonathan, do you want to kind of maybe double click into that concept a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The whole concept of the last mile is around that closing that critical gap between a patient receiving diagnostic testing and to be able to action the results of that diagnostic testing to ensure that they receive the complete targeted therapy. And the problem here has got something to do with ownership, and we can talk soon about the role of the diagnostic organization versus a pharma organization, but also the hospital system. But I think that being able to come together and to mitigate the leakage points or those gaps in care is critical. And by way of demonstration, the Precision Medicine Coalition published in 2022 a study looking at 1,000 non-small cell lung cancer patients. And the aim of the purpose of the study was to identify where the gaps were in care. And what we found was over 50% of those patients did not receive the comprehensive diagnostic testing. And of the 50% that did, 30% of those that received the identification of the targeted therapy that they should receive did not receive it. And so what does that mean? Well, firstly, it says that the patient is missing out on the critical therapies that they need. The second one, that anyone that's investing to improve patient care on this call should be concerned and maybe thinking about what are ways that they can better impact opportunities but critically also mitigate some of the misuse of resources to get there. And we'll talk a bit later about the market segments and how we can most effectively close the gap by really making those people that are prescribing therapies comfortable. The last piece is we will introduce the precision medicine liaison. And the precision medicine liaison has a critical role to play in closing that gap. And they are fundamental to the success of precision medicine. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, we're so close and yet so far. It's a really complicated journey and a lot of great information there. When both of you think of examples of what good looks like, can you provide some specifics or an example of the successful deployment of precision medicine or precision medicine liaisons that you can speak to? Jonathan, why don't we start with you?
Chris, I don't mind saying that over the years, people have said that the last mile is a gap that's very difficult to close. And although that is true, and in measuring impact is also not without its challenges, that we set out in 2022 on a program focused on PIK3CA mutation in metastatic breast cancer, and to challenge, can we impact the last mile? And to give you a sense about the problem, PIK3CA testing was run at a time when many of our customers felt that maybe too late to best have therapeutic benefit of its target therapy called alpelisib. And PIK3CA testing was promoted to support second-line alpelisib treatment, and the diagnostic test was a next-gen sequencing test run after the failure of the first-line therapy. And as I said, the customer feedback was often that the introduction of alpelisib and the testing of PIK3CA was too late in the patient journey to optimize the delivery of care. So we discussed running, and we ran a program that would look at discussing with customers comprehensive testing up front, gathering all of the insights on that patient, and to look at developing a comprehensive long-term clinical plan that maps multiple lines of therapies and potentially shortens the gap between the treatment transitions. And we've seen it in other cancer areas. In 2023 at ASCO, that we gathered customer feedback on this program. And firstly, the customer feedback was it completed the picture. It enabled them not only to use next-gen sequencing, but also the introduction of PCR testing that could enable them to more effectively gather all that was going on with that patient. What it did was it enabled them to create a roadmap for longer-term treatment program. And so it's saying we will do this in the first line, and then we'll be ready for the second line. And what it did is it got feedback around better engagement and simplification of their communications with the patient, which is always a concern. Oncologists typically are going to be challenged if they can't have a conversation with a patient about the care that's going to be delivered, including some of the things that the patient can do to help the oncologist. So the ability to minimize delays between the treatment was also a big one, because often in the early stages, it was do the first line therapy. At the failure of the first line therapy, work the patient up again and go into second line therapy. And that often could create delays, including in some cases, the uses of chemotherapy in between. So what we learned from this was that it improved the patient journey and workflow. It enhanced that confidence both of the provider and patient. And as we said earlier on, the confidence is what's going to drive uptake. What it also said was the precision medicine liaison was mission critical as a subject matter expert, and being able to have the discussion not only around early comprehensive testing, but what would happen with the results once they did it. The last piece, it also identifies for organizations that may have a first line and a second line therapy in any disease area, that being able to effectively simplify the process and the workflow, gain confidence between the physician and the patient, is going to be very good for the way that they can deliver medicines to those patients that need them. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, that's great. Acceleration, simplification, always the concepts that are the holy grail of helping getting those treatments to patients quickly. Brian, do you have any thoughts on kind of what best practices or what good looks like in the area of precision medicine?
Well, I wanted to add in that our clients really value, Chris, and appreciate our experience in this marketplace. We've been working in precision medicine for many years and really helped build one of the first teams out there. And so consequently, because of our learnings and working in multiple markets, working with many clients and staying abreast of really the evolving, changing market in precision medicine, clients come to us and they want access to really experienced talent in this area. They want to help in designing their strategy for deployment. They also know that it is important, and I think Jonathan did a great job highlighting this. How do PMLs interact with other customer engagement teams within an organization, whether it's in medical affairs, whether it is in commercial sales? It is really important to have individuals that understand the value they bring to laboratories or reference laboratories, pathologists, but also in how PMLs can help facilitate dialogue between sales and medical organizations, and really be leading experts as an organization evolves into a precision medicine model from a traditional pharmaceutical cell. So a lot of experience in that area. And, you know, I really, it's always a pleasure to work with an organization that's building out their precision medicine strategy.
Great feedback. They always say the harder something is, you know, you have to know it well to make it look easy. So it's always impressive, the success and track record you have. So the experience really pays off.
Thank you, Chris.
We've explored the significance of effective, you know, testing in identifying targetable patients and its role in successfully delivering medicines to them. Jonathan, do you want to maybe take a stab at explaining the dynamics between the diagnostics and the pharmaceutical companies and the role of precision medical liaisons?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, Chris, because, and maybe oversimplistically, but the role of the diagnostic labs is to ensure that each patient receives the right test at the right time.
Sure.
The role of the pharmaceutical company is to ensure that every patient receives the correct medicine at the correct dose that their diagnosis identifies. But the problem is that there is a clear gap between these two.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the bridging between an identified diagnosis and a treated patient is the problem that we need to solve. And there's a lot of winners and losers here. From the diagnostic company's point of view, they lose when there is a gap because hospital systems start to question why to keep running a test and paying for it if it doesn't drive the specific clinical decision. The pharma companies also lose because patients are not receiving the medicines targeted to that diagnostic result and or for the duration that they require, and many providers start to refuse to adopt new drugs. Both pharma and diagnostic companies put pressure on their resources as they try and find ways to effectively build the demand, which is being able to action the result of that diagnosis and to be able to effectively treat the patient. Healthcare professionals clearly get frustrated with the complexity, as we spoke about earlier on, and they sometimes are more inclined to prescribe the therapies that they're more confident with than the therapies that may be more effective for the patient. Hospitals raise questions around patient and operational outcomes and question the intention to treat, which then affects everything along the way. Most importantly, the patient loses here because the patient doesn't receive the therapies that they need. So to our audience, as we know, the cost of introducing a drug is incredibly expensive. The cost of establishing a diagnostic test is incredibly expensive. And I don't think we should forget the fact that when we enter a market, particularly at launch, we're attracting the attention of those earlier adopters. And we know from research over history that that's only about 15% of your serviceable market. So what it says is that for your launch to be successful, or your uptake of your medicines, your diagnostic to the target patient to be successful, you need to think through how you're going to reduce the barriers to adoption for 85% of your customers. And that is a significant issue. So if you imagine being able to more effectively generate that confidence to treat, then that is what we're talking about in terms of the closing the gap. So the precision medicine liaison is critical in this function. Firstly, because they're the subject matter expert of the last mile. They play a compliantly liaison role with cross-functional stakeholders in the hospital. And not only testing, it's about what do I do with the results. Secondly, the hospital operational stakeholders of the broad numbers of roles that are played, that's often some of the most confused or the ones challenged the workflow and the complexity. And the precision medicine liaison frequently plays a role within a hospital, particularly with things like multidisciplinary teams, where they can encourage conversations around improving precision medicine and closing those gaps in care. And finally, for the early adopters, tools like clinical pathways that exist and are being used, they're great for those early adopters because the clinical pathway tells them what to do. But for the 85%, those people that are typically not the first to adopt the therapies, they are wanting to know not only the what, but the how, the when, and the why, because that is the conversation that they need to be having with their customers. And it's a critical role where the precision medicine liaison plays to be able to raise the confidence to be able to engage those customers and treat patients with the right medicines. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, I love what you're painting a picture there. It reminds me of a Sherpa, going up Kilimanjaro, right? It's that you need someone, not just the what, but when and where and why. And it's a really complex journey that you're painting and the friction that's involved in it. So you really need those supporters, those helpers to navigate that pathway. It's a good description. So Brian, I'm interested in your thoughts on where the PML in your experience should reside in an organizational structure and why.
Well, a point frequently lost in the sort of discussion as you decide where precision medicine team sits within your organization as a manufacturer is that there is a need to discuss diagnostics generically in the context of targetable biomarkers, yet avoiding talk about specific therapies, the brand, as it relates within the package insert. And, we can use the companion diagnostic as an example when a product is approved with a companion diagnostic. In general, this means that, a sales team, when they're talking about a product that has a companion diagnostic, they do have to remain completely within label because it's a branded discussion. And there is a specific approved companion diagnostic that goes along with the product. We do know, though, that often there are other diagnostics that may be available for use. And by having the PML really stay above brand, above in the discussion of the diagnostics relative to the disease area and not specific to a product, they can have a more robust conversation. They really are able to not be drawn into the capacity of existing roles within a commercial organization, like a sales team, or a medical team, like an MSL team, who have already very specific roles within that. They also are not directly tied into the data analytics piece. And so I think when we look at the current environment as a company is launching or adding new products in that are precision medicine products, we think about them being aligned generally into the commercial organization. Really supporting developing a patient funnel, making sure that there is an opportunity for the right diagnostic to get in for these patients. Pre-approval, often where clients are getting really into this market and they're starting with a precision medicine product, we recommend more a laboratory diagnostic liaison that is pre-approval and typically in the medical affairs side of the business because there's not a full commercial organization in place yet. I would say that there's not a one size fits all to answer that question. And then so we would, we typically talk through what are the strategies, what are the needs, what are some of the pain points there, and then help an organization decide what is the right approach.
That's fantastic. Really good insight. As we mentioned, the role of the PML is a critical bridge between the diagnostic uptake and the physician comfort level treating with the treatment decision. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on how does the PML interface with the commercial sales teams and what successful integration has looked like in your experience?
Look, Chris, it's a really interesting question, because in setting up precision medicine organizations, the organization often argues a lot around, do they sit in the medical side? Do they sit in the data analytics side? Do they sit in the commercial side? And Brian brought up earlier on about the companion diagnostic piece. And one of the things that we found, and once again, a critical role of the precision medicine liaison, is unlike the sales folks, they're talking diagnostics. They're talking about positive biomarkers, where the sales guy needs to say very much on label. And a lot of the times those diagnostic tests are run in a way that the hospital is saying, if I have a positive biomarker for blah, then what should I do? And one of the critical things with precision medicine liaison is that they play key stakeholder roles for the sales team. Why? Not all hospitals have got an open policy for sales folks to go in there. And the precision medicine liaison, like the MSL, it often has access because they're talking unbranded and they're talking around the diagnostic space. They also have a good understanding of the customer decision profiles. We talked about the early adopters before. The precision medicine liaison builds a unique view of customer decision-making and how they approach care. And so what they'll often find is the precision medicine liaison will speak to a doctor that will say, hey, what would you do if I had a positive biomarker result of X? The precision medicine liaison can then say, I can introduce you to someone that can have that discussion, knowing that discussion will go on to be a commercial discussion. Likewise, the sales team often will say, hey, I spoke to a doctor the other day that wants to use a particular therapy, but they don't know how to approach the comprehensive diagnostic testing. And that's where the precision medicine liaison gets introduced to it. And so I think that when it comes to that, there is a clear line of operation between the precision medicine liaison and the sales team, and also the MSL for that matter, because often the precision medicine liaison will be involved in discussions around trials, because trials with the MSL will often bring up the area of diagnostic testing. So there is a clear rules of engagement here, but it goes to answer the question around how do I test? What do I do with treatment? And the PML and the sales team will defer to each other down the appropriate lines.
That's a great overview. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm looking at the questions, and there's one that's relevant to this topic from the audience. The question is, what are the initial steps that a PML team should consider when interacting with a commercial team, some best practices? So without spilling any tea or secret sauce here, Brian, what are your thoughts on answering that question of how you're setting up the structure to effectively work with the commercial team?
Thanks, Chris. And I think Jonathan touched on a little bit of that towards the end of his discussion. I would say that as we set up and we work with clients, whether we're advising them as Jonathan does in his consulting practice, or as we're designing a PML team, the first thing we do based on our experience is establish the ways of working, a rules of engagement document and training that we work with the PML team to make sure they understand. And more importantly, we work with the medical team and the commercial sales team so that they understand how the teams work, what are their roles and responsibilities, how do they engage with each other appropriately. And we know that there are lots of safe harbor setups so that medical, commercial market access can interact with each other in a very appropriate way, working around accounts. So we have great practices. We've worked with a number of organizations that are, strictly compliant, as well as just general compliance organizations. And as an organization here, we have a head of compliance, and we stay up to breast on all of the concerns from a regulatory and government standpoint. So, we're able to make sure the teams are well prepared and the client is well prepared as they enter that.
That's great. Thank you. One of the other questions that was brought up earlier was about our data set and how it helps inform those decisions. So do you want to kind of take a moment to talk about how the EHR and the free notes help inform the communication with the sales team and the direction of that?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for that. I'm really excited about a capability we have at Amplity that brings proprietary EHR data, which is really unstructured, HIPAA compliant, free text HCP notes for approximately 30 million patients, along with patient level data from our ecosystem partners. This is unique information that tells really the why prescribers are using a product or changing to another product. So much rich information, and particularly in precision medicine, it really helps inform decision making, giving insights into comprehensive real-world patient profiles, diagnostic histories, and treatment plans, so that when manufacturers can see information about customers relative to the claims data, for example, which really is the what, right? How is that working? This tells manufacturers and tells us, our teams, the why is that data showing what it's showing? Very unique, and really provides a great opportunity to identify key opportunities where we can, our teams can really pinpoint specific needs and gaps. Jonathan had mentioned the leakage, and it can inform mitigation strategies for that leakage. Ensures that the PML teams and the sales teams are both targeting the right physicians and institutions. And as an example, we recently published a poster at ASCO to highlight major gaps in biomarker testing and targeted therapy that use in non-small cell lung cancer. And in a study of about 61,000 patients, only 13.4% were recorded as being biomarker tested. And of that 6,387 patients with a mutation identified, only approximately 36% of those received an indicated treatment, showing there's still a lot of opportunity here. Our data, really suggests that this is, and this is the kind of insight you can expect, that you can make some decisions in real-time adjustments in your strategy, and you can streamline the communication between the PMLs and the sales organization. Chris, back to you.
Great insight, and that's wonderful information. When you can really understand why the doctor is doing what they're doing, it can really help shape and move that forward. With that in mind, kind of talking about data and then the analytics, how could the vision of advanced analytics impact patient treatment, specifically in precision medicine? Jonathan, do you want to maybe address that and your thoughts around that area?
A critical area, Chris, because if you think about when starting a precision medicine organization, you've looked at what is the imperatives for your organization. You look at understand how do you actually plan to be able to effectively deliver medicines or diagnosis to that particular space. But one of the things with the Precision Medicine Coalition study is a perfect example. What you find is along the way, how do you mitigate the leakage points or the barriers to care to be able to make that successful? The world is changing now, where there is substantial toolkits that are enabling real-world data to be able to look at the patient flow. In the patient flow, to be able to understand comparatively which patient flows worked well, which didn't work very well, to be able to identify where the hospitals are struggling in terms of the translation from diagnosed to treated. But then it's what it's enabling is the precision medicine team to be able to use that data to be able to identify specifically how and where they embrace the customer at that hospital. Some hospitals are in a situation where they don't know what test to run or when. Some of them test really well, but don't tend to convert that to a treated patient. In the future, I believe that the role of people like the precision medicine liaison in the presence of advanced data analytics to be able to not only look at where the flow is, but critically to be able to work out where patients have been identified that could or should be approached for treatment by their treating physicians plays a critical role, because right now that there is a way by which data, particularly advanced analytic data, can uncover patients who should be receiving the benefit of medicines that weren't before. It's a critical piece of technology, but it's also only as good as what happens with the data to ensure that the physician or stakeholder in general is confident to know what to do with that result. Data, precision medicine liaisons, it's a critical marriage there.
Great information, great information. Good, I know that I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A, and we did see some nice questions coming in that we'll make sure to address. But before that, I just want to ask one last question for both of you. What are some of the most surprising learnings that PMLs have brought back from their field experience? I think so many times the rich information and frontline input is really gained back from, these talented individuals. So, Jonathan, do you have any real world kind of examples of PMLs bringing back that information that's been valuable?
I do, Chris. There's 3 or 4. The first one is, I think that the precision medicine liaisons identify areas of opportunity for pharma organizations to more focus their investments in ways that can impact demand. And the comments that we've talked about today with the people that are not early adopters, or the ways to drive confidence. There is a massive amount of spend that goes into making a therapy successful, and being able to do that effectively is something where there's a great opportunity for advancement. The second one is that there is a massive level of confusion about the complexity of the landscape, both with a diagnostic and therapeutic choice, and it's getting more and more. And from a diagnostic and a pharma company point of view, often that there is a level of cynicism about the education that goes into those, because they're often branded, or they're often too high level. And I think the opportunity to use data to work out exactly how the precision medicine liaison or the commercial organization can communicate with the customer is critically important. The community hospital is probably one of the biggest areas, and in the real world evidence that we have looked at, that the amount of patients in the community settings that don't have access to comprehensive diagnostics, or the confidence to be able to work on the workflow complexity to receive new therapies, is probably the biggest opportunity, not only to deliver the therapies, but also to be able to help instruct the uptake of patients' enrollment into trials. And lastly, I think that the whole area of real world data is a challenging one. Hospitals are very sensitive around the security of their own data, but I think the world is evolving now, by which we have a wonderful opportunity to be able to come together and use that data more effectively. All of these coming together to be able to close that last mile that we've spoken about through today's session. Back to you, Chris.
That's great. Brian, I want to hear your thoughts, but just hearing about what you just said, Jonathan, reminds me of the, data lakes of real world evidence that are out there. And with AI kind of coming of age, and accelerating over the last few years, I see such a value in the insights data that we have that's put on that AI platform that can dig through it, and you can ask those questions that it will help enhance and be the bridge that kind of converts the patient waiting for the treatment and the manufacturers who are trying so hard to get those medicines into their hands. It's a great bridge, and the Sherpas of the precision medical liaisons are so key. So I think you summarized that really well.
Yeah, I love, Chris, that we're embracing AI and Chat GPT, and it's I think it's going to only help us in this area.
We're so fortunate that we've been using it for a couple of years, so that we're kind of, it's not new to us. So I'm thankful for the team that's kind of deep in that experience and has been leading the way. So
Yeah.
it's a brave new world. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Well,
did you have anything from the PML side, anything brought back from the field experience? I'm sure from your experiences that you have some stories.
yeah, I appreciate it. I think for those on the line that are manufacturers, I think they understand, during COVID and since COVID, access has been very difficult for their sales team and some of their medical teams as well. And what we found is there is a lot of interest in the diagnostic piece. There's a lot of interest in being able to put the right medication with the right patient. And so PMLs have opened doors. They have prescribers are eager to engage and discuss updates in precision medicine, really find out new information about testing. And this opens up hard to see or no see positions for manufacturers. So we love that's kind of an unintended consequence that we're really pleased about that our teams have seen. We also see that often because access is difficult, prescribers are really burdened with seeing more patients and doing more documenting. They don't have a lot of time for discussions anymore. But we have seen these short conversations that maybe commercial medical teams are having with prescribers are extended into more meaningful conversations with a PML when diagnostics are involved, and they can participate in that. And I think manufacturers are also looking for ways to develop higher level business relationships with customers. And, we do see that this type of role, a focus within precision medicine, really can help elevate that relationship and enable, more robust relationships within an organization, obviously compliant, but really thinking about how problems are solved in this healthcare environment.
Perfect. I know we're running short on time. I want to do a lightning round because there's a few questions I want to make sure to address. So let me start off, Jonathan. Can you tell, based on your experience with precision medicine, what other therapeutic areas, I know you talked about it in your introduction a little bit, can you see precision medicine heading and how it can be leveraged?
I'm involved in a couple of areas at the moment, Chris. Neurology is one big one, and so is cardiovascular. Both of them are typified by clinical decisions that can better be made with additional data in hand. And so I think as we're moving forward and we're seeing the evolution of new therapies in both cardiovascular and neuro, then this is going to be a big growth area moving forward.
Perfect. Love it. Could talk. That's a whole nother webinar I would love to kind of dig into. Another quick question, Brian, it comes from the audience. How do you qualify the value of PML team in the process? It's clearly critical to the launch, but any thoughts on how to it says quantify. I think they mean quantify the value.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And I know, maybe that's coming from a commercial leader for sure, who is very concerned about return on investment, very concerned about how this impacts the growth of the business. And again, I sort of come back to that, as we think about what does that mean to a commercial organization, they want to make sure that patients, the appropriate patients, are identified as early in the process as possible, which gives those patients an opportunity to get the right therapy at the right time, at the right dose, as Jonathan said. And that's where the team really can help benefit, whether it's preparing the market at launch, post-launch, and ongoing, and provides a very valuable area there. So you think about the patient funnel, that is that is one of the most important parts. And as we see the market increase, patient awareness of patient funnel increase, as well as an increase in the specific diagnostic testing, you really can measure the value that the team is bringing. Jonathan, do you have anything else to add to that?
Look, I think the big three for me is the first one being able to measure the uptake in testing. With PCR on PIK3CA grew threefold, 300%. The second one is the numbers of patients that are identified that were not front of people's mind beforehand. And the last one is to be able to generate the interactions between the customers and other parts of the organization, such as we spoke about before, where the precision medicine liaison introduces the commercial team to have discussions compliantly around a branded area where the PML obviously was not able to do that.
Fantastic. Great way to close the conversation. I think we're at time, but let me take a moment to say thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Brian. Your expertise and how you've been able to communicate the important elements of this last mile of the journey and getting medicines into the hands of patients to help them with their lives has been really valuable, and I appreciate it. Michelle, do you want to officially close the event and add the final remarks?
Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. So on behalf of Amplity Health, thank you, Chris, Jonathan, and Brian for sharing your insights, and of course to our audience for attending today's discussion. Your feedback is valuable, so please take a moment to fill out the very short survey that will pop up when you log off. You will receive an email with a recording of today's discussion within the next few days. In the meantime, please email the speaker directly or visit us on amplity.com for more information on precision medicine, advanced analytics, and more. Have a great day, and we hope to see you at a future event. This concludes today's session. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye all. Thank you.